America is less free, less safe, more burdened by debt under, frankly, your leadership in this administration's. That's really, unfortunately, the macro trend since the end of the Cold War. We really haven't managed it well. And part of the reason is China has really responded to the end of the Cold War just fine. They've really focused on China's national security, and they've managed to be at peace. The United States has focused everywhere else in the world but China. I think a lot of my other colleagues have addressed Pacific concerns, but I want to focus right here in our own hemisphere. Do you still believe that the Monroe Doctrine has any relevance for the direction of security in our own hemisphere?
I'll have to come back to you on that in terms of refreshing my memory on the details of the Monroe Doctrine. What I can tell you is two things. One, in terms of China, we're in a much stronger position than we were 3 years ago.
Let me focus not on China, like I said, on our own hemisphere. So let me just, here's the cliff notes. Should we pay more attention to our own hemisphere than to other parts of the world?
We're paying intense.
Does the border with the United States and Mexico matter?
It does, and I hope.
Does the border with Guatemala and Mexico matter?
Congress now will be voted on because that would improve.
Does China's expansion into South America matter to the United States? Because we used to care. We used to care when other countries came in to this sphere more than we cared where they went over in their own parts of the world.
We've been more focused on this hemisphere than any previous administration I can think of, including, by the way, administrations I participated in.
Look, I will commend you on using fishing rights off of Ecuador to push China out of that region. I can say, hey, there's been a win, maybe not much more than that, but we haven't done much to counter China's influence all over this hemisphere. And notably with cartel, is there any illicit finance going into Mexico?
Oh, certainly. Illicit finance going into Mexico, yes.
What are we doing about it?
We're engaged with the Mexicans virtually every single day.
We sanctioned any financial institution?
We've sanctioned people, and we've also, beyond sanctioning people, we've worked to give Mexico the assets, the authorities, the capacities they need to help take down these cartels, to disrupt the financing.
How's that turning out? Are we taking down the cartels?
We've seen significant progress over the last 3 years, yes, in taking down cartels, disrupting drug supply, seizing more fentanyl. The last couple of years.
Okay, so here's the thing: the cartels under the Trump administration were trafficking humans across the border, and the New York Times say that Trump administration they were making around $500 million a year. 1.5 years in, so that's at the midway point from here back. The Biden administration they said that the cartels are making over $13 billion a year smuggling people across the border. Is that helping rein in the cartels by what you're doing to stop the cartels? Why wouldn't you reverse the Remain in Mexico policy?
Well, again, I would commend to the Congress the bill that is before it. That I think
no, that doesn't reverse the policy. That just funds more illegals everywhere in the country and actually puts a cap on the future administration for getting them out. Let me turn to the influence that is going on in Guatemala. You were recently there, and just before your visit, members of the Guatemalan Congress were threatened by our embassy there that they would lose their U.S. visas, and their kids who are studying here would lose their visas to study in America if they didn't support removal of Guatemala's Attorney General. Do you think the United States should be manipulating members of a foreign Congress in this manner?
Not a question of manipulating members of foreign Congress. It's the fact that in the recent election in Guatemala, there was a very strong attempt made to prevent the democratically elected president of Guatemala from taking office. There was an attempt to disrupt the inauguration of that president. And if we stand for democracy anywhere, we have to stand for it everywhere, including in Guatemala.
So is the State Department's opposition to the Attorney General at all related to her recent investigations to determine if the Biden administration's complicit in the trafficking of children into the United States? Nothing to do with that? Correlation, not causation?
That is absurd.
Good to hear. One question about NATO. NATO's front and center for the war in Ukraine. Back when CIA Director Burns said this in February of 2008, quote, Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for the Russian elite, not just Putin. In my more than 2.5 years of conversations with key Russian players, from knuckle draggers in the dark recesses of the Kremlin to Putin's sharpest liberal critics, I have yet to find anyone who views Ukraine and NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russia's interest. Today's Russia will respond. Do you believe Mr. Burns' assessment was accurate?
What year was that? I'm sorry?
2008.
It may have been at the time. I think we've seen everything we've seen since from Russia and from Mr. Putin certainly argues in the other direction.
No, it says that it's really important to them. They're literally invaded. I mean, if you look, you left Afghanistan on August 31st of 2021. And on September 1st, you entered into a strategic partnership with Ukraine to support their membership in NATO. And then you continued to escalate, and Vladimir Putin invaded there. That doesn't excuse his invasion, but it's clearly a red line. I wish I had more time. I yield my time back, and I now recognize the gentleman, Mr. Costa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to retread